Werewolf Rumble Number 1. Dear Scary Stories NYC. The first time I played D&D, my dungeon master was a guy who had the chance to be a real-life werewolf, but declined the opportunity. In fact, we personally witnessed him physically battling two of his friends, literally while they were transforming into werewolves. I won't say that was how we first noticed the guy, but that was the first time we got to know him. This was all back in 1982, when I was 19, and we lived in a nice suburban town, which shall remain nameless, in New Jersey. I will admit that we were situated over in the general neighborhood of Hillbilly Hall, which was our favorite tavern and restaurant. Hillbilly Hall is basically located in the middle of a green natural part of the state, to the southwest of the Sourland Mountain Preserve, and about 14 miles to the northeast of New Hope and the Delaware River on the Pennsylvania border. Sure, there are a lot of people living in private homes all through there, but they're all sort of doing it within a greater forested natural area. The Hunterdon County Sourland Mountain Preserve and the Sourland Ecosystem Preserve are like down the road, essentially. So you've really got the best of both worlds. You can find good people, good food, and conversation. Then you go right outside and see an animal or even a cryptid that isn't supposed to be there. I grew up kind of a smart aleck about the woods until the day a mama bear chased me and my dog back into our house one day after we accidentally got too close to her cubs. This was not by Hillbilly Hall, but it wasn't all that far away from it either. So you're wise to have some respect for at least the unpredictability and the vastness of the inescapable wilderness that we aren't really going to ever tame. So back then, we were allowed into the hall at age 19, but I think only for another few months when they raised the drinking age to 21. So then we were actually banned from the bar for a couple of years starting January 1983. I remember that the law specifically said that if you were 19 and legal before January 83, then you were supposed to be grandfathered in and still allowed to go to clubs and taverns in New Jersey. It wasn't enforced that way though, sadly. But this story all happened during that golden year, when we had all the rights of an adult at age 19, but we all still lived with our parents and had no adult responsibilities. In that environment, we looked up to guys older than us who still managed to remain young or cool in some way. And there were these three sort of heavy metal nerd rocker D&D guys we knew, who my friends and I were very impressed with. They were these chubby couch potato dudes in their late 20s or early 30s, still spending their time playing D&D, hanging at the video arcade, and then partying at Hillbilly Hall. To us at age 19, these portly fellows in black t-shirts and jeans were truly gods among mortal men, getting away with life rather than succumbing to it and becoming boring. You know how young guys look up to somewhat older guys, seeing them through rose-colored glasses. So one evening, we were cruising along, thinking we were looking like badasses in my friend's mom's Datsun hatchback, riding through the forests in that most amazing and awesome part of New Jersey. It was a gorgeous sunset, and we were all in good but mellow moods. Then the guys started shouting and pointing and jumping up and down, and I could see off in the distance out in the field those three big-boned, long-haired metal dudes, all having some kind of a knockdown, drag-out battle of some kind. My buddy Cecil pulled a car off the road and onto the grass, and we all sat there inside, watching this fighting happening maybe 90 or 100 feet away from us, near the tree line. These guys were a lot more agile than I might have expected, given how overweight they were, and what hard partiers as well. It looked like this wasn't the first time they had fought each other either. I began to wonder if this was some kind of a ritual or performance of some kind, as they each seemed to react perfectly and instantly to the others. Their movements reminded me somehow of a martial arts class. Cecil put the car in gear and slowly drove us a bit closer to the situation. I wasn't sure when it started happening, but at some point, we all began to notice that two of the guys had hair which was growing longer. As in noticeably longer right in front of our eyes. They were growing beards that were running down their chest and their belly. Hair was sprouting from their arms. Both of them pulled their black t-shirts off, revealing that their entire bodies were becoming covered in what looked to me like animal fur. Their faces were not the same as before. They were becoming covered in fur as well. One of the guys said it looked like Planet of the Apes, but the apes had no fur on their faces in those movies, and their mouths didn't protrude as far out as these were beginning to. Those guys were starting to resemble dog-faced people. I want to note that one of the three did not seem to have transformed at all. He was the one that both of the increasingly hairier, increasingly more canine-looking others were shoving around and messing with. He was really agile for a guy as big around as he was. Kind of like a pale, long-haired, balding version of Fred Rerun Berry from What's Happening. No matter how quick that guy was, though, it was 2 against 1, and the two were only getting bigger and stronger as they finished changing into werewolves. Oh, by the way, you know how the Hulk's pants always split below the knee when he gets larger? Well, it turns out that in real life, if you suddenly quickly get larger and more muscular, your pants do split. It's just that they tend to split above the knee a whole lot more than below it. Cecil decided that we needed to save that guy, so he drove toward the big fight scene, beeping his horn at them. The 2 werewolves both ran off, and I saw one of them split his pants open by the seat as he ran away into the woods. The human didn't seem very grateful. In fact, he flipped us off, then trudged back to the road. Cecil backed us up off the grass and back onto the blacktop. I remember us driving along as the guy walked on the road, and we were talking out the window to him. We invited him to come in the car with us because we were driving to Hillbilly Hall. We told him we knew he liked it there, and he turned and got angry at us. He said that was where those werewolves hung out, so how did he know we weren't werewolves too? We all gushed like fanboys, asking him how he knew werewolves, and if he could show us how to become wolfmen too, and so forth. He sort of glared at us for a while, and then said we were too dumb to even be werewolves. Then he went right back to walking, and Cecil went right back to driving slowly alongside him as we shouted out fanboy questions. I mean, this guy had just been duking it out with 2 werewolves, and to us, he was now a celebrity. The constant barrage of compliments and attention eventually convinced the guy that we weren't werewolves, although we'd sure love to become them if he would teach us how. So this guy, who I will call Nate, sat down with us at Hillbilly Hall at a table. He lectured us about how we did not want to become werewolves. Apparently, it had something to do with werewolves being evil and us being too stupid. He said that if we went through with it, we'd think at first that we were becoming more free, taking and eating whatever we wanted. In time, however, we would become more and more tightly bound to the evil forces from which that kind of shape-shifting results. He was talking about lawful evil versus chaotic evil, and it was all flying above our pointed little heads. So Nate became our dungeon master. He formed a new D&D game with us guys, where we learned an awful lot about many things. So once he had gotten all these concepts into our heads, Nate called us together and told us that he was ready to explain to us how to become the kinds of werewolves that we had seen him fighting that day, the kind that his former best friends had become. First, he told us that each time we became a werewolf, we would wake up the next day a little bit more evil. This evil would become parts of our days, as well as our nights. Second, he asked us if we still wanted to know how to become shape-shifting wolfmen. 2 of us said no, but me and Cecil said yes. The 2 of us who had said yes had second thoughts, when the answer wasn't unanimous. Nate said that all we had to do was sign a pact, agreeing to swear to follow through with the ritual. Then he would take us aside and privately give us all that we would need. Well, I thought about it, I did. I knew I would be giving up a lot by turning the opportunity down. But I also would have been giving up a lot if I went ahead with it. The word evil didn't really mean half as much to me back then as it means now. But the difference between growing into an old evil werewolf thing or growing into an old nerdy D&D player seemed vast to me even then. So none of us wanted Nate to show us how to become werewolves in the end. I wish I could have found out the info without having to agree to go through with it, just because I admit I am very curious. But unless Nate was lying to us, he must also have been a werewolf. If he knew how to effect the transformation, and if he had the power but decided against using it, then becoming a werewolf must not be all that it's cracked up to be. And so that was the upshot of our witnessing that Werewolf Rumble. Werewolf Rumble number 2. Werewolf Anti-Baptism. Dear Scary Stories NYC. When I was in my early 20s, I used to spend time alone in the woods reading books and trying to avoid humanity. One of my favorite spots to hide, like a Bigfoot, was in the woods along the Jordan River in northern Michigan. It's sort of to the northeast of Pleasant Valley. I liked it back then because it felt like I was stepping out of the modern world into almost any part of the past. These days I think back on how much better it was for all of us back then, and I regret that I spent so much time in nostalgia. Now that I'm old, I wish I could go back in time to that same miserable youth that I so desperately wanted to escape back then. At any rate, I would hide in the woods on a hill by the river in such a way that I could watch the little handmade bridge and see people coming without them seeing me. If I remained quiet, then nobody would know I was there, and I could maintain my peace. On this one day, though, hiding in those woods afforded me a ringside seat to the battle of the century. 2 adult male werewolves attempting to force indoctrinate an adult male human into the ways of their form of lycanthropy, loudly shouting obscenities at each other. 3 very, very dynamic men fell, ran, rolled, and tripped onto the wooden bridge, drawing my attention to them. I scanned the scene for any projectile-firing weaponry. I was close enough that they could injure me or worse, by accident, without even realizing I was there if they were armed. I saw nothing metal glinting in the waning sunlight of the golden-colored evening. What I saw instead was a very unfair tag-team wrestling match. 2 against 1. One of the 2 reared back, and I swear, he began howling, like he was howling to the moon before the sun had even set. That alarmed me. There was something completely bat and wacko going on here, and my first urge was to get out of there. My second urge, though, was to stay perfectly still and to study what was happening. I was curious about it. I wanted to know what this situation was. Plus, I was so scared of this insanity playing out in front of me that I wasn't sure if my knees would work if I tried to stand up on them. After the one man howled, the other one did as well, and they both started doing this stuff that I could only compare to scenes from John Carpenter's The Thing, maybe. Or I guess some parts of the transformation scenes in the howling. The 2 guys started changing forward and backward in weird ways, as though reality itself kept scratching back and forth like a hip-hop DJ. Only each time the DJ skid the record back, it would go back to a different past, and each time he scratched it the other way, you'd see some kind of a different future. And so I saw a man rear back with his hand balled into a fist. Then when he leaned into a big punch, that fist was somehow now a paw. Or maybe it was just a malformed wrist. Then it was a paw with fingers. And then the forearm would melt directly into the shoulder and the chest. It also, I guess, reminded me of that crazy part of Altered States when the guy changed into that caveman, or whatever it was. But the aspect of it that hit me hard watching this sort of an event in real time, knowing that it was not special effects, but in some way a true reality being interpreted by my eyes and nervous system, was that I was not actually witnessing any kind of transformation at all. No, I was seeing two individuals retuning reality wavelengths to move themselves within different states, one in which they were human and one in which they were not, and then to draw those states and wavelengths into this reality here. So the man would have hands which were then not there, or were then paws, or claws. The physical form of the being seemed to wiggle back and forth, like the audio does if you try to tune in a radio station that's barely at the edge of your receiver's range. If all that was too confusing to understand, then the simpler version was that the two men were growing and ungrowing fur. They were elongating their snouts into wolf snouts, and then the snout was retracting itself into a cute furry bob nose, before stretching back out into a snarling canine form. They were not becoming werewolves in a logical, linear fashion, as you would see in the movies. They were jerking back and forth. They were evolving and devolving in fits and spurts. Still, in the middle of their forward and backward transformation drama, the beastmen tossed their captured human off the bridge into the water, and then they dove in after him. This battle was unlike anything I'd ever seen. I was able to see pretty clearly not only some incredible action, but some revelations about the nature of the universe. I saw one man with a fur-covered body flash back into human form, as I witnessed his pants become covered in fur before that snapped into a third and fourth reality. Each part of their bodies seemed to be moving from reality to reality, desperately trying to tune into the same wavelength as the rest of their form. Hip deep in the water, both werewolves attempted to subdue that human, but their physical forms were too inconsistent and too transitory. The human male was strong and wily, not to mention desperate. He scored a number of solid hits and lucky punches on those two half-men, half-wolves. Finally, I watched with interest as he got free and made a break for it. Just before he looked to be out of their clutches, one of the near wolves lunged and bit him viciously on his lower left neck, just at the shoulder. Screaming in agony at the open wound, the man soon began undergoing the same spasmodic, back-and-forth transmogrifying that the other two had been. At this point, all three of them becoming more and less and more like the Dogman, the two held their adversary by his shoulders and pushed him down under the water. It looked to me like they were trying to drown him, and when the submerged man stopped struggling, I figured I had just witnessed a murder. After all that, to see the man held under the water until he no longer breathed was especially unnerving to me personally. I prayed that werewolves couldn't smell fear on the wind, because I wasn't feeling much other than fear in that moment. Again, I wanted to go, but I argued internally that it might be safer just to freeze in place and wait this out. If they had taken that big muscular guy down, then I should be no trouble. Then there was a crashing sound, and out of the water sprang a third werewolf in that river down below. I didn't grasp where he came from until it dawned on me. This was that human. This was their captive. It had now become as they were. It was now a werewolf, too. The three of them sort of climbed over each other to get out of the river and bark a lot at each other, too, leaping around violently and insanely. I don't know about you, but when a pack of dogs goes bananas, growling and destroying things, I find it intimidating. When the dogs are bigger than me and standing on their hind legs, I need a new word beyond intimidating to describe how it makes me feel. I was grateful that the animals who had once been men ran in the opposite direction from me. and so I went home. Nobody ever understands me when I say this, but I, for some reason, had a deep sadness overwhelm me as I walked home from there that evening. I can't really explain it. I don't know why I felt sad or even what I was sad about. Maybe I was just being a baby and feeling sorry for myself. After all, I had gotten pretty shaken up while watching. The Werewolf. Anti-baptism. Please join us in thanking S.A. Rose. Why we're so lucky, nobody knows. She makes us so happy from head to our toes. She helps us come out smelling like S.A. Rose. Please help us thank the wise and wonderful S.A. Rose for making this episode possible. S.A. Rose has been a paying channel member for so long, I'm too young to remember that far back. Wait, that isn't possible. But you know what is possible? You becoming an executive producer just like S.A. Rose. And here to explain how is our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman. Hank? Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.